1963, Susie Rotolo, wearing a coat so heavy that she thinks she looked fat, and Bob Dylan, wearing a coat so thin you can tell that he's cold, walked northeast on a slushy Jones Street towards West 4th. If Dylan was looking up instead of down, he could see the Music Inn and Alan Block's sandal shop. The pair, of course, were photographed. The photo shoot is why they were out that day. And the resulting image became one of the most iconic album covers of the 1960s. Because of Dylan's connection to West 4th Street, over the years many have mistakenly assumed that that's where the couple were walking. And fire escapes and parked cars and snow on the ground, pretty much everything in the picture that's not Dylan or Rotolo, generally do little to help identify. But if you look over Susie's left shoulder, the right side of the album cover, you'll see a building that's lighter than the others. This is 9 Jones Street, and there's a very distinctive diamond pattern across the building's facade that appears in similar images from the same photo shoot. And that's why we don't have to depend on 48-year-old memories to determine location. That's how we know they were walking on Jones Street. 161 West 4th Street is really the centerpiece of the Dylan in New York story. Unlike Izzy's, where he hung out and flipped through folk albums, or the Gaslight Cafe or Gertie's Folk City where he played, or one of the countless downtown couches where he crashed for a night or two, this is where Bob Dylan actually lived, his very first New York apartment. He moved here in the fall of 1961, just a few weeks after he signed his first contract with Columbia, and just a few months after he had met Susie Rotolo at a folk radio benefit up at Riverside Church. And when Susie turned 18 that November, she moved in with him. They lived in a small 2-room space on the top floor in the back, facing not West 4th Street, but the alleyway behind 6th Avenue. This apartment is also where Susie learned her boyfriend's real last name, which is certainly an important moment in every relationship. After coming home quite late and quite drunk one night, Dylan spilled the contents of his wallet, and a draft card for Robert Allen Zimmerman dropped to the floor, and the conversation between Bob and Susie soon lost a good amount of its previous playfulness. 50 years ago, the bottom floor of 161 West 4th was home to Bruno's Spaghetti Shop. There was also a pizza place around the corner on 6th Avenue. As Rotolo writes in her memoir, they were constantly surrounded by the smell of overcooked tomato sauce. In the interim, the bottom of 161 has been inhabited by a second-hand shop, a couple of sex shops, including for the last 10 years, Tic-Tac-Toe, a store featuring exotic novelties.
Oh yeah, but it's really people just confirming that he used to live here and how long he lived here. Did we have any contact with him? Does he come back to visit? You know, like no, he doesn't. We wish he did, but no.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you get people like, people cry, you get people that just really connect to him in a different way.
And this is not exactly where the Red Sea was parted, it's just where the man slept.
Exactly.
So, yes, okay. We don't have any confirmed miracles.
He was only here for 2 years, you know.
Right.
And then there's the legend that he had the love letters that were found in the wall. It was, you know, that's what kind of like staples his, I think it's the fantasy of the passion of Bob Dylan.
I'm seeing your world of people and things. Here paupers and peasants and princes and kings.
This used to be called the Hotel Earl, and if that name sounds familiar, it could be because that's the hotel that provides the setting in the Coen Brothers movie Barton Fink. It's called the Washington Square Hotel now, and it's in much better shape than it was in 1961. When Dylan arrived in New York, one of the first things he did was take a bus over to New Jersey. He wanted to visit Woody Guthrie, who was hospitalized with what we now call Huntington's disease. And it was at the hospital that Dylan met Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and Elliott was staying at the Hotel Earl, so Dylan decided that he would stay there too. Ramblin' Jack was living in room 312, and Peter Lafarge, the son of a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist and the songwriter behind The Ballad of Ira Hayes, lived in room 306. Dylan's most associated with room 305, and when Dylan and Joan Baez began their relationship, they stayed at the Earl, and her song Diamonds and Rust refers to the place, for better or for worse, as that crummy hotel by Washington Square. Even without Bob Dylan, the Washington Square Hotel is probably second only to the Chelsea in terms of rock and roll history in New York.
We still get a lot of musicians staying here.
Right.
But they're at a different level.
Yes.
Bo Diddley stayed here until he passed away, whenever he was in New York.
Right. Stayed
Hemingway
here.
had his in his notes.
Okay.
And Roger McGuinn came back a few years ago. Remember which room he stayed in?
I think one of the reasons why it was easy for most of the rock musicians to be here was because of the studio, the electric lighting over there. So Dylan recorded there, Bowie and so many people, so all of them took time coming in and out of this place.
John Phillips wrote California Dreamin' in this hotel, and not too long ago, Nora Jones used to work at the adjoining North Square restaurant, even singing at the Sunday brunch for a month or so before she moved on. At the northernmost end of McDougal, a block north of Washington Square Park, used to be the 8th Street Bookshop. And from 1947 to 1979, it was run by a man by the name of Eli Willens. Now later on, Eli's son Sean became a famous historian. He wrote The Rise of American Democracy, The Age of Reagan, and also a book called Dylan in America. Now Susie Rotolo used the 8th Street Bookshop as a kind of library. She went there, sat on the floor, and read Henry Miller and Anais Nin. But the main reason that the 8th Street Bookshop is important to Dylan fans is that this is the place where Allen Ginsberg and Bob Dylan first met. This is the Minetta Lane side of a Mexican restaurant called Panchitos. And as you can see, the management is quite fond of not only the color red, but of big banners that celebrate one of the top 6 margaritas in all of New York City. As it did 50 years ago, the building runs through a whole block, and you can either enter from McDougal or Minetta. Before it was Panchitos, it was a coffee house called the Fat Black Pussycat. And before it was the Fat Black Pussycat, it was a kind of hangout for chess enthusiasts called the Commons. But it was on the Minetta Lane side of this building, late on a Monday afternoon over several cups of coffee, that Bob Dylan wrote Blowin' in the Wind before taking it over to Gertie's for Gil Turner to play that very same night. We're at the corner of Thompson and Bleecker, specifically 160 Bleecker Street, and that sign up there is all that's left of the Village Gate. Now, to the best of our knowledge, Dylan never performed at the Village Gate, but he did have a friend, Chip Monk, who lived underneath in a basement apartment. And so in September of 1962, somewhere near where CVS now stores their generic cold medicines, Bob Dylan wrote A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. The basement bar called the Alibi Room has been through a number of changes, but in the early 60s it was called the Gaslight Cafe. It's referred to as a basket bar, meaning performers had to pass a basket in order to collect tips from the audience. And the Gaslight didn't serve alcohol, so in between sets, the musicians went upstairs to the old kettle of fish in order to drink. Dylan played here early and was recorded often. The Gaslight was the first place he ever played Masters of War. And in 2005, Columbia Records co-opted an old Dylan bootleg they called Live at the Gaslight 1962. The disc contained 10 songs, including A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, written around the corner in a basement apartment on Bleecker Street, and Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, inspired by a heartbreaking separation from his girlfriend Susie Rotolo. And then they sold it exclusively at Starbucks. Just 2 spots on this block of McDougal Street, the Cafe Wah and the T-shirt gallery, outwardly reveal a Bob Dylan connection. The Wah, of course, is the place where this all started, and they're promoting a Dylan anniversary show on January 29th. The T-shirt gallery can't lay any claim to history itself, but it's in between the old Gaslight, the old Kettle of Fish, and Izzy Young's Folklore Center. And the T-shirt gallery has Bob Dylan and Greenwich Village T-shirts available year-round.
That much interested in
Right.
that kind of music
Right.
surrounding Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix and everything. This guy pretty much deserves the
Either the credit or the
blame.
One of the two.
Yes. Help me. Lifeline.
He
yes,
will
sir.
call his cousin
Free Willy.
Free Willy. Free Willy is the movie. That's something.
Probably don't remember. There was a lady, she was in, let's say, mid-50s, and she stopped by and said, oh, Bob Dylan, blah, 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 here and that. and here is the leaf from the Bob Dylan garden, because by that time she went to backyard of the McDougal apartment,
Wow.
which is some kind of garden whatsoever. I don't know
Yeah,
if
there
it's
is a garden
abandoned or
in the
what.
back.
middle.
Yeah, and she picked it up, and when she saw the T-shirt, she thought that he is also a big Bob Dylan fan, so she shared with him.
According to legend, the Dylan in New York clock starts on January 24th, 1961, a Tuesday afternoon inside a half-filled club called the Cafe Wa. What and how long Dylan performed is open to debate. The general consensus seems to be Woody Guthrie songs, and certainly no more than 3. But the owner, Manny Roth, did let Dylan on stage that day, though nearly every other time Dylan played the Wa, he was backing up Fred Neil, the writer of Midnight Cowboy's Everybody's Talking. There's a line in Dylan's Talkin' New York, one of just 2 originals on his self-titled debut, where he sings that he was blowing his lungs out for $1 a day. And playing harmonica at the Cafe Wa is what he was talking about.
Well, I got a harmonica job begun to play, blowing my lungs out for $1 a day. I blow it inside out and upside down. The man there said he loved my sound.
Not only Bob Dylan, but Jimi Hendrix played the Wa before his career exploded in London, and Bruce Springsteen played here in 1967, albeit an afternoon teens-only no-alcohol show as a member of the Castiles. And few things have changed in the past 50 years. Sure, the layout's different, but it's still the same building in the same location.
It's always been right here. If you see the pictures, it's always been right on this corner. It's always been that front door right there. I think the confusion happened because Manny Roth also owned what's now the Comedy Cellar. That's what people say the Wa originally was.
Supposedly even the floor is the same, laid down by the bar's owner in 1959, 2 years before Dylan first arrived.
He's raving about he loved my sound.
In 1969, after a move to Woodstock, a serious motorcycle accident, and years of not touring, Dylan purchased 94 McDougal Street, supposedly sight unseen. And he came back to New York City with his wife Sarah and their children, a move he later said was a stupid idea. One of the problems is that he was harassed by A.J. Weberman, a self-proclaimed garbologist, who made a habit of near nightly pouring through Dylan's trash. And in 1971, Dylan's patience wore thin enough that, according to legend, he laid the smack down on Weberman's garbage-toting ass right there in front of his apartment building.